Greetings, philosophers. Welcome to another O'Neill Low Tech video. Wanted to recap some things from week 2, respond to some of the things on the discussion board, and give you a little bit of a running start as you look forward to week 13. Kind of want to follow up in particular on some of the discussions that were going on about the relationship between the pre-Socratics and normal guys. Also think about the way Socrates fits into that and how he kind of stands as an answer to the problems that came up with the pre-Socratics, and that'll actually propel us forward a little bit as we look forward to Plato and to Aristotle. So kind of a key transitional week here as we go into week 3 and start thinking about Plato and Aristotle. So with the pre-Socratics, a whole cloud of confusing things, and that was really part of what I wanted you to get when I asked you the question, how would you feel if you were just a normal guy listening to all these pre-Socratic philosophers talk? Sproul discusses maybe 20. I think in the excerpts that I gave you, I kind of brought your focus to about 5 or so of them. Let me just kind of give you a little sense of a picture that might pick some of these things up. So, for example, we talked about Thales and Heraclitus, Parmenides, and his disciple Zeno. And I like to throw Pythagoras in because you think you already knew about him, so it seems like you get that one for free. And of course we've got Anaximenes and Anaximander and all the other pre-Socratics with the ideas floating around back there. And that's kind of the sense I wanted you to get, is the variety, the confusion, and even the frustration that would generate. Remember some of the specifics here. Thales said, it's all water. Heraclitus says, no, it's all fire. Heraclitus says, constant change. Parmenides says, no change. Zeno says, no movement. Pythagoras, all is numbers. So we got all these kind of metaphysically varied attitudes and claims about the nature of the world. We also had these different ways of approaching the world. The reason that Thales thought that things were made of water was because his senses testified to the world around him. The reason that Heraclitus suggested that things were in a state of constant change is because that's what their senses told them. So Thales, Heraclitus, it's all about experience and all about sensation. Parmenides, Zeno, Pythagoras, they're appealing to reason. They're willing to even ignore their senses if reason sends them somewhere else. And so reason as it relates to all of these. And so you're supposed to kind of feel that. You're supposed to kind of feel the confusion and the frustration with the pre-Socratic situation. And actually, there's a little bit of a trick question I ask you when I'd say, what would it feel like to be a normal guy back then? As we'll look forward to the end of the semester, this period is a lot like today, a lot like our contemporary period, when people argue about the nature of ultimate reality, and when scientists and philosophers and religious leaders talk about what's really real. The normal guy feels kind of confused by it all. And so for some reason, though, this wasn't the end of the story when it came to philosophy. There was some movement forward. And so that's kind of what I want us to draw our attention to historically. But then in a couple of weeks, we'll start applying it to our time. How is our time similar? And maybe how can we think in useful ways about how to live today? So you might kind of think of a big kind of cloud of confusion back here with all the pre-Socratic philosophers, and the sort of thing that might come out of that. We might think of skepticism. Who's right? We don't have any way of knowing who's right. How should we even be able to figure this out? Sophistry. sophistry is this appeal to fancy talk instead of to the facts or to well-reasoned arguments. It's more important to be persuasive with words than it is to be getting the world right. You might remember at the beginning of the Apology, Socrates says to the jury, I'm not very good with words, so you're going to have to be sympathetic, you're going to have to be patient with me because I don't talk very well. Of course, he's being a sophist, he's using words to try to persuade people, but this is kind of what you get out of this confusion, and don't lose these things. We'll come back to them later on, but it is this context in which we then met Socrates, where Socrates somehow shows up as a response to all these things. And so what I want to kind of do is figure out what Socrates did that started off by solving this problem, and that'll kind of point us forward a little bit. One other thing to think about here, kind of useful grid for everything that we're going to do in the future, is to think in terms of a kind of three-part pyramid. Or a wedding cake almost, with 3 layers. And to think of this 3-tiered wedding cake as kind of the shape of a worldview. The bottom level is what we call metaphysics. This middle level is epistemology. And then this top level is ethics. And these words are familiar to us as we've begun here, as we start to use them in the reading and in some of our discussion with each other. But metaphysics is just the branch of philosophy, or the part of philosophy that deals with questions of ultimate reality. So is there a God? What's really real? What's the nature of the world around us? What are we? Are we biological machines? Or are we souls? Or are we part body, part soul? Do I have free will? Those are all metaphysical questions. And then epistemology is the study of knowledge, or better, justification. When do we have good reason to say that something's true? When do we say we know? And when do we say, well, I don't know, but I think, or I guess? So epistemology deals with justification of our beliefs. And then ethics, how should we live? Right? And it kind of flows, right? Depending on how the world is, that'll affect how we understand the world, and then that'll affect how we're supposed to behave in the world. And you might remember at the beginning of his Apology, Socrates said, I've been accused of inquiring into the nature of the heavens above and the earth below. And he says, you got me confused with other people. And he really means, well, you got me confused with guys like Thales and Heraclitus, Pythagoras, who are making claims about the nature of the heavens above and the earth below. Those are all metaphysical claims, right? And Socrates says, I don't do metaphysics, right? I'm not into metaphysics. That's not what I'm trying to do. He says, I'm also accused of things like trying to make the weaker argument appear stronger, and using reason in certain ways. And that kind of connects up with the category of epistemology. He says, I don't really even do epistemology. That's not what I'm really about. He says, as a matter of fact, what I've dedicated my life to is the pursuit of virtue and trying to make other people's lives better, improve the lives of Athens. And so Socrates says, look, I'm all about ethics. That's what I do. So he's trying to define what's courage, what's friendship, what's piety, all those kind of things. And so one of the things we ought to note right off the bat is that the way that Socrates responded to the confusion of the pre-Socratic period was by saying, I'm not going to worry about metaphysics, and I'm not going to worry about epistemology. I'm going to focus on ethics, because I think we can find some common ground in the area of ethics. And so, in effect, he saves philosophy at the very beginning through this move, through what he does here. But what he does here is incomplete. This isn't a good enough answer. Francis Schaeffer used to say that the secular humanist has his feet firmly planted in midair. And that's kind of Socrates' condition here as we encounter him, that he wants to make all these claims about virtue and ethics, but he's purposely avoiding issues related to metaphysics and epistemology. And because of that, he's got his feet planted in midair. But this then helps us as we think our way forward. And so on the one hand, there's something good about that. things go forward because we can start working with ethics and then try to figure out other things related to that. But the major move forward then comes with Plato, because Plato is a student of Socrates, and Plato wants to say Socrates is right about his ethics. So we want to come up with a system that includes Socrates' ethics, but what needs to happen is we've got to kind of come up with a metaphysic and an epistemology that will support Socrates' ethics. So Socrates is busy talking about virtue and about how we have the virtues within us. These are memories, or it's innate, or we're recollecting them, remembering them from a prior life or something like that. But he doesn't give us any kind of how does that work, or how do we come to have those things. And so Socrates' most famous student then is Plato. And what Plato basically sets out to do is to say, yep, I agree with Socrates' ethics. In order to keep them, we got to fill in the gap for metaphysics and epistemology in order to sustain the ethics. And so as you read The Cave this week, and as you engage in that dialogue, the sun, the line, the cave, and those things, I think that's kind of helpful. You might think about the sun as it relates to ethics. You might think about the line as it relates to epistemology. And you really think about the cave as it relates to metaphysics. This is Plato trying to say, here's what's really real. Here's the way the world really is, and then here's how we can interact with it. And then the second thing that we're going to do in the coming week, in week 3, is Plato's most famous follower is Aristotle. And later on I'll tell you why I've got Plato at the top of the board and Aristotle at the bottom of the board. But Plato and Aristotle are kind of closely related, teacher and student, but they also have some pretty significant differences. And so Plato says, here's the way to fix Socrates' system, and Aristotle basically says, actually you're going about it all wrong. So that's one of the other questions that we're going to think about this week is, what are the differences between Plato and Aristotle? What's the basis of their disagreement? So, just to kind of wrap it up, really good work on the discussion board. Some of the discussions were really robust and thoughtful and in depth, and I really appreciated seeing that and seeing the work that you guys are doing. Sorry for frustrating you, but it was on purpose. I wanted you to be sympathetic to the pre-Socratic condition. I wanted you to see how Socrates, by focusing on ethics, salvages the project, and that really sets us up for Plato, who's certainly the most important philosopher of the Western tradition. And I think the best way to understand Plato is that what Plato is trying to do is tell a story that'll hold up the system that Socrates began. So as you read and think and then engage the discussion boards this week, I think it'll be really helpful if you think in those categories. Until then, you know how to get a hold of me. You can send me emails. I know you're going to continue your good work with your reading, your good work on the discussion boards, and God bless you. See you soon.